Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, let me tell you something today. God is not a God of accidents. He is a God of order, a God of design, a God of divine strategy. You may be looking at your life right now and wondering, why hasn't it happened yet? Why does it feel like I'm waiting forever? Why do I keep facing roadblocks? But I came to tell you today that God is making everything fall into place even when you can't see it. Trusting God requires something that doesn't come naturally to us: letting go. We are wired to want control. We want to hold the steering wheel of our lives, make our own decisions, and determine our own outcomes. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith is not about managing every detail. It's about surrendering every detail. It's about believing that even when we don't understand the process, God is still in control of the outcome. Letting go means releasing our grip on the things we think we must have and trusting that God will supply what we truly need. Some of us are holding on so tightly to broken plans, toxic relationships, and failed dreams because we are afraid of what life looks like without them. We cling to what is familiar even when it is hurting us because at least we know what to expect. But when God is calling you higher, He will ask you to loosen your grip. He will ask you to trust that what He has for you is better than what you are trying to hold on to. Letting go is uncomfortable because it forces us to rely on God instead of our own strength. It means stepping into the unknown without a backup plan, simply believing that God is enough. And that's hard. That's hard when the bills are piling up. That's hard when doors keep closing. That's hard when you feel like you've been waiting forever for your breakthrough. But this is where faith is tested. Faith is not about trusting God when everything is going smoothly. Faith is about trusting Him when nothing makes sense, when the job falls through, when the relationship ends, when the sickness comes, when the opportunity passes you by. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting your trust from yourself to God. It means understanding that your limited perspective can't compare to His infinite wisdom. You may be looking at your life from ground level, but God sees the whole picture. He knows why He didn't let that situation work out. He knows why He had to remove certain people from your life. He knows why you had to go through the struggle. And if you could see what He sees, you wouldn't fight so hard to hold on to what He's trying to remove. Sometimes we hold on to things because we think they define us. We believe our job, our status, our relationships, or our plans are the foundation of who we are. But when you trust God, your identity is not in what you do or what you have, it's in who He says you are. That means you can release the fear of losing something because you know God will always provide what is best for you. When you finally let go, something powerful happens. You stop striving, you stop wrestling, and you start resting in God's promises. You begin to walk in peace, knowing that the same God who has carried you this far will not leave you now. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. We live in a world that teaches us to rush, to chase, to force things to happen on our schedule. We pray and we want answers immediately. We set goals and we expect results overnight. But God operates on a different timeline. He is not bound by our deadlines, our clocks, or our impatience. He moves with divine precision, orchestrating every detail in ways we cannot always see or understand. Waiting on God can be frustrating because we often mistake delays for denials. We think that if something hasn't happened yet, it never will. But what looks like a setback is often a setup. What feels like a detour is really divine direction. There are things you have been praying for, dreams you have been holding on to, and doors you have been knocking on, but God is saying, not yet. not because he's withholding from you, but because he's preparing you. You may think you're ready, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows that if he gave it to you too soon, it might break you instead of bless you. When we trust God's timing, we learn that waiting is not wasted time. Every moment of waiting is a moment of preparation. David was anointed as king long before he ever sat on the throne. Joseph saw visions of his destiny long before he stepped into power. Moses spent years in the wilderness before leading Israel to freedom. The pattern is clear. Before elevation comes preparation. And preparation takes time. You may be wondering why God hasn't opened certain doors for you yet, but he is working on things you can't even see. He's preparing people, he's shifting circumstances, and most importantly, he's preparing you. There is protection in God's timing. Sometimes we are so focused on what we want that we don't see the dangers that come with getting it too soon. Have you ever looked back and thanked God for not giving you something when you thought you needed it? That job you didn't get, that relationship that didn't work out, that opportunity that passed you by. It may have felt like rejection, but in reality, it was God's protection. He sees what you don't see. He knows what you don't know. And when the time is right, what is meant for you will come to you, and nothing will be able to stop it. Trusting God's timing means surrendering your own timeline. It means believing that his delays are not denials, but divine setups. It means knowing that just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. The seed doesn't sprout the moment it's planted. It takes time to grow roots before it ever breaks the surface. And just like that seed, what God is doing in your life is taking root beneath the surface. You may not see it yet, but when the time is right, everything he promised will come to pass exactly as he planned. Pain is something we all try to avoid. We pray against it, we run from it, and we question why it has to happen. But what if I told you that your pain is not pointless? What if I told you that every tear you've cried, every trial you've endured, and every battle you've fought has been working together for something greater? God does not waste pain. Every struggle, every disappointment, every heartbreak is shaping you into the person he has called you to be. Pain has a way of teaching us lessons we would never learn in comfort. It strips away our illusions of control and forces us to depend on God in ways we never have before. When everything is going well, we tend to rely on our own strength. But when we go through the fire, we realize we can't make it without him. That is where faith is built. That is where endurance is developed. That is where we stop talking about trusting God and actually start living in trust. There are things God is doing in your life right now that you can't see because you're too close to the pain. It feels unfair. It feels overwhelming. But just because you don't understand it now doesn't mean it won't make sense later. Some of the greatest testimonies come from the greatest trials. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison, but every painful experience was positioning him for his destiny. If he hadn't gone through the pit, he would have never made it to the palace. What looked like suffering was actually preparation. God uses pain to refine us, to shape us, to remove the things in us that can't go where he is taking us. Sometimes the pain comes in the form of loss, losing people, losing opportunities, losing comfort. But what if God is allowing those things to be stripped away because they are not part of his plan for your future? What if the very thing you're grieving over is something God removed to protect you? It may not feel like it now, but one day you'll look back and thank him for the doors he closed just as much as for the ones he opened. Pain is a tool in God's hands. It stretches us, it humbles us, and it pushes us beyond what we thought we could handle. And the beautiful thing is, God never wastes it. The very thing the enemy meant to destroy you is what God will use to bless you. The people who hurt you, the seasons that broke you, the struggles that shook your faith, God will turn them all for your good. You may be in the middle of it right now, questioning if anything good can come from this season, but trust this. Your pain has a purpose, and when God is finished, you will be stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the blessings that are ahead. Faith is not just something you feel, it's something you do. It's easy to talk about faith when life is good, when the path is clear, and when things are working in your favor. But real faith is not proven in the easy moments, it is proven in the moments of uncertainty. In the moments when you have every reason to give up, but choose to move forward anyway. Faith is not just a belief in your heart, it is a decision to act even when you don't see the outcome. When God told Abraham to leave his homeland and go to a place he would show him, Abraham didn't have a roadmap. He didn't have all the details, but he moved. He acted on what God said. Too many people are waiting for all the answers before they take a step of faith. They want clarity before commitment. But if you have all the answers, it's not faith, it's certainty. Faith means stepping out before you see the full picture, trusting that God will provide what you need along the way. Faith requires movement. It is not passive. It is not sitting around hoping something will change while making no effort to walk in what God has already spoken. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he didn't just sit in the boat and say, I believe I can walk too. No, he stepped out, he moved. He put action behind his faith, and as long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he did the impossible. Some of us are waiting on God when God is waiting on us. We keep asking him for direction, but he has already given us instructions. He has already opened doors, but we are too afraid to walk through them. Faith is tested in action. It's easy to believe for provision, but will you still believe when your bank account is low? It's easy to believe for healing, but will you still trust God when the symptoms persist? It's easy to believe for breakthrough, but will you keep working toward it when nothing seems to be changing? Faith is not just a feeling of confidence, it is the decision to keep going, even when doubt tries to creep in. When you truly have faith, it changes how you live. It affects how you speak, how you move, and how you respond to challenges. Faith refuses to be paralyzed by fear. Faith refuses to wait for perfect conditions. Faith understands that God rewards those who step out, who trust him enough to move forward, even when the path is uncertain. God never called us to a faith that is comfortable. He called us to a faith that requires action. If you believe God has called you to something, take a step. If you believe he will provide, stop worrying and start walking. Faith is not just something you feel on Sunday morning. It is something you live out every single day. Just because you don't see God moving doesn't mean he's not working. There are moments in life when it feels like nothing is changing, like your prayers are going unheard, like your situation is stuck. But God is always working, even in the silence, even in the waiting, even when it seems like nothing is happening. He is orchestrating things behind the scenes in ways you can't imagine. Think about Joseph. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. To the natural eye, it looked like his life was falling apart. But behind the scenes, God was setting him up for something greater. Every step, every hardship, every moment of waiting was a piece of a bigger picture that Joseph couldn't see yet. The very people who betrayed him were unknowingly pushing him toward his destiny. What looked like a setback was actually a setup. This is how God works. He moves in ways that are beyond our understanding. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean he's not making a way. Some of the greatest breakthroughs happen when it feels like nothing is happening at all. That's because God doesn't just work on the surface. He works deep, shifting things, aligning situations, preparing the right people and creating the right opportunities. And when the time is right, what he has been working on will be revealed. One of the hardest things to do is trust God when you can't see the evidence of his work. We want signs, we want confirmations, we want instant results. But faith is trusting that God is moving even when you don't have proof. It's believing that he is setting things in order even when your circumstances say otherwise. Just because you don't see a way doesn't mean there isn't one. Just because the door hasn't opened yet doesn't mean it won't. Sometimes God allows delays because he is working on things we don't even realize need fixing. You might be praying for a new opportunity, but God is preparing your character to handle it. You might be asking for a relationship, but God is healing things in you so you don't bring old wounds into something new. You might be wondering why a certain door closed, but God is protecting you from something that wasn't meant for you. What you see as a delay, God sees as divine timing. Trusting that God is working behind the scenes means learning to rest in his plan. It means understanding that he is not limited by what you see. It means knowing that he is always steps ahead, positioning you, preparing you, and working all things together for your good. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll look back and see that every struggle, every delay, and every detour was leading you exactly where God intended you to be. And when he reveals what he's been working on, it will be greater than anything you could have imagined. Surrender is not weakness, it is the greatest act of faith. It is the moment when you stop striving, stop fighting, and stop trying to figure everything out on your own. It is when you say, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. I trust your plan more than I trust my own understanding. And when you truly surrender, something powerful happens. Peace enters your life in a way that nothing else can provide. Many people live in a constant state of anxiety because they are trying to control what was never meant to be in their hands. They try to fix things that only God can fix. They try to open doors that only God can open. They try to carry burdens that they were never meant to carry. And the result? Stress, frustration, exhaustion. But God never called you to live that way. He called you to surrender. Surrender is releasing the need to know every detail